No rifle, no trap, but they fed an entire tribe. They lived in a world where every sound mattered, and survival depended not on the power of weapons, but on the depth of knowledge. The indigenous peoples of America were masters of hunting, turning nature itself into their main ally. Their methods were so effective that they were able to feed entire communities for thousands of years. Watch the video to the end to learn how a herd of bison could be trapped using only knowledge of the wind and terrain, and what plant poison applied to the tip of an arrow could stop even the largest beast. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret that underlies all hunting techniques. Before picking up a bow or spear, the indigenous hunter turned to his main tool, his mind. Success depended not on weapons, but on the ability to think like his prey. The hunt began long before leaving camp, with deep observation of the world. The hunter studied the habits of animals, their routes, diet, and reaction to the weather. He knew where animals drank water, where they hid from the heat, and where they looked for food at different times of the year. This was not just knowledge, but complete immersion in the ecosystem. The hunter became an invisible part of the forest or prairie. He learned to move silently, breathe evenly, and control his own scent. Patience was his greatest virtue. A hunter could lie in ambush for hours, motionless, waiting for the perfect moment. He blended into his surroundings, becoming a rock or a bush, and became part of the natural landscape. He read the ground like an open book. A broken branch, trampled grass, a barely noticeable track on dry ground. All these were signs that told a whole story. He could determine the species of animal, its size, speed, and even how long ago it had passed by from its tracks. The hunter used all his senses to the limit. He caught the slightest smells, listened to every rustle, noticed movement in the periphery of his vision. His perception of the world was incredibly sharp and holistic. Special rituals were often performed before the hunt. This was not just superstition, but a way to mentally prepare, focus, and ask the spirits of nature for luck. The hunter felt a deep connection to the world and respected the life he was about to take. This psychological and spiritual preparation was the foundation of his skill. It gave him confidence, calmness, and clarity of mind. Without it, even the best bow would be useless. It is difficult for modern people to imagine such a level of unity with nature. We rely on technology while they relied on themselves. Their minds were the most accurate navigators and the most perfect weapons. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this approach, where the main weapon is not technology, but a deep understanding of nature? Let me know in the comments. What if I told you that the most effective weapon of the pre-gun era was made of wood, tendons, and glue? The bow was not just a tool, but an extension of the hunter's arm. Its manufacture was a true art, requiring knowledge passed down from generation to generation. Special types of wood, such as yew, juniper, or ash, were chosen for bow making. The wood had to be both strong and flexible. The blank was dried for months, sometimes years, to acquire the necessary properties. The most powerful bows were reinforced by gluing dried and softened animal tendons to their backs. This layer acted as a spring, significantly increasing the power and speed of the shot. The tendons were glued with glue made from bones or skin. The bowstring was also made from tendons or strong plant fibers. It had to be thin, light, and not stretch over time. The accuracy of the shot depended directly on the quality of the bowstring. Arrows were no less complex. The shaft had to be perfectly straight and smooth to ensure stable flight. For this purpose, young shoots of willow or other suitable plants were used, which were straightened over a fire for a long time. Arrowheads were made of stone, bone, or antler. Using special tools, thin flakes were chipped off a piece of flint or obsidian, giving the arrowhead a sharp, symmetrical shape. Such an arrowhead had enormous penetrating power. The feathers on the tail of the arrow served as a stabilizer. Most often, eagle or turkey feathers were used, cut in half and glued to the shaft. Proper feathering caused the arrow to rotate in flight, which significantly increased accuracy. Mastering the bow required years of training. Hunters began learning to shoot from childhood. They could hit a moving target from a long distance, shooting intuitively without aiming. There were different types of bows and arrows for different tasks. A short bow was convenient for hunting on horseback in the prairies. A long and powerful bow was used for hunting large game in the forest. The art of making and using a bow was the pinnacle of technology at the time. It was the perfect combination of natural materials and human ingenuity. This tool allowed the hunter to act quietly, quickly, and from a safe distance. But the bow was effective in the hands of a lone hunter. How could an entire tribe hunt a huge herd? In the next chapter, you will learn about the grandiose and deadly method of drive hunting. Are you ready to learn the truth about how hundreds of tons of meat could be obtained in a single day without a single shot? The tribes of the Great Plains practiced a unique and large-scale hunting method known as the bison jump, or piskun. It was a true engineering and logistical operation that required the participation of the entire community. A high and steep cliff was chosen for this method. The site was carefully prepared and could be used for centuries. At the foot of the cliff, a pen was built out of stones and logs to hold the fallen animals. The most difficult part was getting the huge herd of bison to move in the right direction. To do this, two long lines of stones, bushes, or poles stuck into the ground were built along the route leading to the cliff. These lines, diverging in a funnel shape, created a corridor that guided the herd. Dozens, even hundreds of people participated in this operation. Young and fast hunters played the role of drivers. Their task was to sneak up on the herd and gently begin to drive it toward the corridor. The rest of the tribe hid behind stone barriers. When the herd entered the corridor, they jumped out, waving skins and shouting loudly. This created a living wall that prevented the animals from turning aside. A specially trained hunter, the buffalo runner, played a key role. He would put on a buffalo hide and run ahead of the herd, leading it toward the cliff. This role was incredibly honorable, but also deadly dangerous. Frightened by the noise and movement, the bison began to panic. They rushed forward, not seeing the cliff until the last moment. The rear ranks pushed against the front, and the herd had no choice but to rush down. It was a grand and frightening sight. A huge living river of mighty animals plunged from the edge of the cliff. At the foot of the cliff, other hunters finished the job, quickly killing the wounded animals. This type of hunt provided the tribe with a huge amount of meat, skins, and other materials for the entire winter. It was a triumph of collective strategy and a deep understanding of animal psychology. The piskun was not just a hunt, but a complex social ritual. This method demonstrates that indigenous peoples possess not only hunting skills, but also engineering minds. They knew how to alter the landscape and organize hundreds of people to achieve a common goal. It was a true battle of wits in which strategy prevailed. What if everything you've been taught about complexity is outdated? Hunting large game was important, but smaller prey often formed the basis of the daily diet. To this end, Native Americans used countless ingenious traps and snares that worked without human intervention. The simplest and most common was the snare. It was made of strong rope, sinew, or even horsehair. The snare was set on a trail that animals often used. When an animal passed through the loop, it tightened. Often, the snare was connected to a bent young branch. The trigger mechanism was activated, the branch straightened and lifted the prey into the air. Another common type of trap was the crush trap. It consisted of a heavy log or stone that was held in a raised position by a complex system of sticks. The bait was placed under the weight, and when the animal touched the trigger mechanism, the weight fell. Nets woven from plant fibers were used to catch waterfowl. The nets were stretched over the water in places where birds roosted. At night, hunters scared the flock, and the birds flew straight into the net in the dark. Tribes living near rivers built complex fish traps known as weirs. These consisted of a wall of stones or stakes driven into the bottom, built across the current. A narrow passage was left in the wall, leading to a woven basket trap from which the fish could not escape. Pit traps were sometimes used to hunt large game. They were dug on animal trails and carefully camouflaged with branches and leaves. Sharp stakes could be driven into the bottom of the pit. Creating and setting traps required a great deal of knowledge. It was necessary to know where to place the trap, how to camouflage it, and what trigger mechanism to use for a particular species of animal. The hunter had to think like an engineer and a naturalist at the same time. These silent hunters worked day and night in all weather conditions. They were proof that effectiveness does not always lie in strength and speed. Sometimes the simplest idea turns out to be the most ingenious. Traps saved energy and time, providing food with minimal risk. They were an integral part of a survival system based on intelligence and a deep understanding of nature. But how did hunters approach the largest and most dangerous targets? In the next chapter, you will learn about the spear and its more technologically advanced ancestor. The spear is one of humanity's oldest tools. In the hands of an experienced hunter, it was a formidable weapon capable of stopping even a bear. But Native Americans improved it with a simple but ingenious device. Spears for hunting were long and sturdy, with a sharp tip made of stone or bone. They were balanced so that they were easy to throw. A hunter could hit a target from a distance of several dozen meters. Hunting with a spear required not only strength, but also accuracy. It was often practiced in groups. Hunters surrounded a large animal, preventing it from escaping, and struck it from different sides. However, the real breakthrough in spear throwing technology came with the invention of the Atlatl, or spear thrower. This device was a stick with a spear rest at one end and a handle at the other. It worked like a lever, significantly increasing the range and power of the throw. The Atlatl effectively extended the hunter's arm. When thrown, it gave the spear much more acceleration than could be achieved with just one hand. The flight range of a spear thrown with an Atlatl could exceed 100 meters. This simple device changed the rules of hunting. It allowed hunters to attack large game from a safer distance. The force of the blow was such that the spear could pierce thick skin. Using a spear thrower required special skill. The movement had to be precise and coordinated. Hunters trained for years to master this art. Despite the advent of the bow, the spear and Atlatl continued to be used. In the forest, where there might not be room to shoot a bow, the short and powerful throwing spear was indispensable. It remained an important part of the hunter's arsenal. These tools demonstrate man's constant quest for innovation. Even in the Stone Age, people were looking for ways to make their hunting more efficient and safer. The Atlatl became one of the greatest inventions of the prehistoric era. It was the pinnacle of ballistic thinking of its time. This simple device made of wood and stone allowed human energy to be concentrated and directed with maximum efficiency. It was a true power amplifier in the hands of the ancient hunter. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how it was possible to approach an animal with acute hearing at arm's length? Good weapons alone were not enough for a successful hunt. The main task was to get close enough to the prey to shoot it without being noticed. Hunters were masters of camouflage. They used natural materials to blend in with their surroundings. Their clothing was often made from skins of the same color as the terrain. They smeared themselves with mud or clay to hide the contours of their bodies and mask their human scent. They would spend hours rubbing the juice of fragrant plants into their clothes and skin to smell like the forest or prairie. The wind was their main ally and enemy. They always moved downwind so that their scent would not reach the sensitive nose of an animal. Sometimes hunters used whole animal skins as camouflage. A bison hunter could cover himself with a wolf skin and crawl on all fours toward the herd. Bison were not afraid of a lone wolf and would let him get quite close. Sneaking up was a slow and meditative process. The hunter moved incredibly smoothly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other without a single sudden movement. He stepped silently, knowing exactly where to put his foot. He used every bush, every rock, every fold in the terrain as cover. He would freeze for long minutes if an animal raised its head or showed signs of unease. His patience was boundless. This skill had been honed since childhood through games and training. Children learned to walk through the forest without making a sound and to hide so that they could not be found. It was part of their upbringing and culture. The art of being invisible was the key to survival. It allowed them not only to hunt successfully, but also to avoid encounters with enemies. It was a deep understanding of the laws of light, shadow, sound, and smell. Do you think modern people, accustomed to city life, could master even a small part of this art? Now imagine that you need to not just approach an animal, but deceive it with sound. In the next chapter, we will learn about the art of imitation. A hunter had to not only see and hear, but also speak the language of nature. The ability to imitate animal voices was one of the most difficult and effective techniques. With the help of special decoys or simply his own voice, he could lure prey within range of a sure shot. Calls were made from a wide variety of materials. These could be hollow bones, twisted birch bark, horns, or even simple leaves. The design of each call was the result of long experimentation and observation. With the help of a decoy, a hunter could reproduce the cry of a distressed cub to attract a predator or a female. He could imitate the mating call of a male to provoke a jealous rival into a fight. Each sound was designed to elicit a specific response. Mastering the use of a decoy was a real art. It was not enough to simply make a similar sound. It was necessary to observe the correct rhythm, intonation, and volume for the imitation to be convincing. In addition to sound decoys, visual decoys were also used. A hunter could wave a piece of white fur, imitating an antelope's tail, to attract a curious animal. Sometimes entire stuffed animals were created to distract the herd. Scent lures were also widely used. Hunters knew which scents attracted certain animals. They could use musk or other fragrant substances to lure prey to the right place or to a trap. The use of bait was a kind of dialogue with the animal world. The hunter did not simply deceive the prey, he communicated with it in its own language. This required a deep understanding of animal behavior and instincts. Every hunter was both an actor and a musician. He knew the repertoire of forest sounds and was able to perform his part flawlessly. A false note could cost him his prey. These methods show how intellectual and creative hunting was. It was like a complex chess game, where you had to anticipate your opponent's moves and exploit their weaknesses. Success came not from brute force, but from cunning and knowledge. All these techniques worked together: camouflage, stealth, and the use of decoys. The hunter created a complex illusion that the animal had to believe. It was the pinnacle of hunting skill. Some tribes had another powerful tool in their arsenal: plant and animal poisons. Poisoned arrows allowed them to hunt the largest and most dangerous game. It was a silent but deadly technology. Knowledge of poisonous plants was secret and guarded. It was passed on only to selected members of the tribe. Mistakes in the preparation or use of poison could be fatal to the hunter himself. The poison was prepared from the juice of certain plants, mushrooms, or the secretions of some amphibians. The process was complex and often ritualized. The plants were collected at a specific time of year and processed according to strict technology. The resulting viscous substance was applied to the tip of the arrow. It was important that the poison not only killed, but also acted quickly enough without spoiling the meat. Hunters were true toxicologists who knew the dosage and effect precisely. The poisoned arrow did not necessarily have to hit a vital organ. It was enough to simply wound the animal so that the poison entered its bloodstream. This significantly increased the chances of success. After shooting such an arrow, the hunter did not pursue the animal immediately. He gave the poison time to take effect. Then he calmly followed the trail, knowing that sooner or later he would find his prey. This method allowed a single hunter to kill an animal that an entire group would not have been able to handle. It was a way to level the playing field in the battle with nature. Human intelligence once again triumphed over brute force. The use of poison required extreme caution. Poisoned arrows were handled with special care. They were stored separately and marked with special signs. When cutting up the carcass, the area around the wound was carefully cut out and discarded. The meat was considered safe to eat, as the concentration of poison was low, and it was often destroyed during heat treatment. The use of poison was further evidence of the indigenous people's profound knowledge of botany and chemistry. They learned to extract not only food and medicine from nature, but also powerful weapons. It was a hidden strength that gave them an advantage. Hunting was not just a way to obtain food, it was the basis of the tribe's social life. The success of one hunter became the success of the entire community. There were strict and fair rules for the distribution of prey. A hunter who caught a large animal never kept it all for himself. First, he gave the best pieces to those who helped him hunt. Then he shared with the chiefs and elders. After that, the meat was distributed among all the families of the community. Special attention was paid to widows, orphans, and the elderly who could not hunt themselves. No one was to go hungry. These rules were an unwritten law that no one dared to break. Greed and selfishness were severely condemned. The survival of the tribe depended on mutual assistance and solidarity. The process of cutting up the carcass and processing the meat was also collective. The men skinned the animal and cut the meat into large pieces. The women then cut it into thin strips for drying, prepared fresh dishes, and processed the skins. Every part of the hunted animal was put to use. The meat was eaten fresh or preserved for future use by turning it into pemmican. The skins were used for clothing, covering dwellings and bedding. Bones were used to make tools, weapons, and jewelry. Tendons were woven into bowstrings and strong threads. Even the stomach contents could be used to make water containers. This waste-free use of resources was a manifestation of deep respect for nature. Animals gave their lives so that people could live, and people accepted this gift with gratitude, not allowing anything to go to waste. The hunter received not material gain, but respect and honor. His status in the tribe depended on his generosity and ability to provide not only for his family, but for the entire community. It was an economy of gift-giving, not accumulation. This social system made the community strong and sustainable. It ensured that even in difficult times, the most vulnerable members of the tribe would be protected. A successful hunt fed not the body, but the spirit of the entire people. At the heart of all indigenous hunting practices lay a profound philosophy. Hunting was not killing, but a sacred act, part of the great cycle of life. Animals were not just a resource, they were another people with whom it was necessary to build the right relationship. Before each hunt, the hunter would pray to the spirits. He would ask for permission and help. He would explain that he needed food for his family and promised to take only as much as was necessary. It was believed that animals willingly gave themselves to a worthy hunter. If the hunter was pure of heart, respected nature, and observed all the rituals, the animal spirits were favorable to him. If he was greedy or wasteful, luck turned away from him. After a successful hunt, a ritual of thanksgiving was always performed. The hunter thanked the spirit of the animal for its sacrifice. He could leave a little tobacco as a gift or perform a special song. This belief system ensured sustainable use of natural resources. It did not allow hunting more than necessary or killing animals unnecessarily. It was intuitive ecological wisdom. The hunter did not feel like the master of nature, but rather a part of it. He understood that his life was inextricably linked to the lives of animals, plants, and the entire earth. This view of the world gave rise to a sense of responsibility. The tribe's myths and legends were filled with stories about hunters and animals. These stories taught young people the right attitude towards nature. They conveyed ethical norms and practical knowledge in a figurative form. Respect was also shown in practice. Hunters tried to do everything as quickly and efficiently as possible so that the animal would not suffer. Wounded animals were considered a bad sign and the result of disrespectful behavior. This worldview is completely different from the modern consumerist approach. For indigenous peoples, nature was not a storehouse of resources, but a living spiritual being. Their relationship with nature was based on mutual respect. The spiritual aspect was inseparable from the practical. Ritual was as important as the sharpness of the arrowhead. It was this holistic system that made their hunting not just a craft, but a true art. We can see that hunting for the indigenous peoples of America was not just a means of obtaining food. It was a complex system that included deep ecological knowledge, engineering ingenuity, social laws, and a developed spiritual culture. They used not only bows and traps, but also their minds, patience, and an incredible ability to understand the language of nature. Their methods, honed over millennia, were perfectly adapted to the surrounding world. They proved that humans can live in harmony with nature, taking everything they need from it without destroying it. This is a harsh and important lesson for our modern world, which often forgets the value of this balance. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. What else interests you about the lives of the indigenous peoples of America, their way of life, beliefs, or social structure? And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new research into the wisdom of ancient cultures.